Hi everyone, welcome to this video. I'm Andy, and today I have Heather Mongielnicki with me to talk about her experience as an occupational therapist. And she used to also be a musician as well. So Heather, just introduce yourself to the audience of where you are coming from and take over.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy chatting with you, Andy. So my first degree is actually in music performance. I was a flute performance major and a professional flutist for many years until I had career-ending injuries. It was one of those things that I knew from the moment I picked up my flute in 5th grade that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I never thought about anything else. It was almost like music chose me. So it was really very, very difficult to then not be able to play. So I kind of haphazardly was then trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, which I had never had to really consider before. And I fell into the discipline of occupational therapy. And somehow everything, it was just the universe was just lining everything up and throwing everything in my lap when it came to becoming an OT. It just all eased and flowed. And I've spent the last 22 years working in treating injuries in the upper extremity. I went and got my certified hand therapy certification, which is an advanced certification in treating the entire upper extremity, not just the hand. It's a little misleading with the word, and now I have my own clinic and I really work and specialize in just treating with musicians primarily. So I teach musicians at a college that are music students all about healthy habits and ways to keep themselves healthy, because there are so many things that go into being a musician. And if I had known all the things that I know now, back then when I was playing and performing, I would have avoided my injuries. So there's lots of things that we just don't think about as musicians. Habits that we do, things that we just kind of patterns that we get into, that if we had just had a little bit of education and known these things, we could avoid injury. And I think it's like 80 to 90% of musicians end up with some form of an injury, and many of those can be career ending. And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. So I think that my goal and my passion is really teaching musicians how to have this healthy habit lifestyle so they can avoid injuries in the first place. And it's all about balance. It's really about balancing your music, your body, your mind, your energy, and doing all the healing around all of those things as well. So that's kind of where my history and kind of how I led into all this.
So Heather, your story is I feel like it's very relevant to a lot of musicians, factoring that your background as a musician, you can relate to a lot of what they were going through. And then also you mentioned about you as an OT and then eventually become specialized in treating the upper quarter, upper extremity, not just hands, which is essential because guess what? When musicians are playing any types of music instruments, they are using their upper extremities all the time. So I just feel like that's a very relevant insight and very relevant background you are coming from, and then definitely can provide a lot of benefits to the musicians population. And then another thing you mentioned, I found that it's very important to hear, is that you mentioned about a lot of the injuries musicians were experiencing can be like career ending. But then if we are able to intervene earlier, we can prevent those from happening. So which is very, very important. Like right now I'm in Austin and we've been seeing some musicians once in a while because Austin is very big in live music. And a lot of them are dealing with a lot of different types of injuries or issues as well. So I totally resonate with that. And I feel like it's very important. It's a very underserved population. But then if we're able to provide resources for the musicians so that they can really prolong their careers tremendously. So I feel like it's very important, and I'm glad you are doing what you are doing right now. But then now I would like to ask from your opinion and experiences if you can list 3 major struggles or challenges most musicians are experiencing, what are those challenges and difficulties or struggles?
I think, that's kind of a loaded question, right? Especially at this time with everything going on right now with the pandemic and everything. So, but, people are practicing a lot more now too. So they have all this time on their hands. So they're playing much more intensely sometimes. They may not be gigging as much, but they're definitely in their practice room playing a lot more. So I think one of the things is being proactive where instead of being reactive. And most of us as musicians never think that we're going to get injured. We think that we're going to be fine. I never thought that I was going to get injured. I never even thought about it. I never realized that some of the little subtle things that I was doing would build up and create the problems that I had. So I think bringing awareness to what you're doing and being awareness of how you're using your body, what your body needs to do to play your instrument, that your body needs to be fitted to your instrument, and just the awareness of all the things that you expect your body to do to play your instrument at the level that you play your instrument at, which is intense. It always amazes me the incredible things that our body does to allow musicians to play with the finesse and the brilliance that they do, right? It's just absolutely incredible. So is it a struggle for them? It's a struggle that they're not necessarily aware of yet. So I think that's one of the biggest things is bringing awareness to what they do and the fact that these problems can creep up and you want to be proactive rather than reactive. When I see people that are having problems, a lot of the things are really issues with fitting their body to their instrument. They've been playing for so long. In many cases, I have a woman right now. She's been playing her violin for 50 years, and she's a symphonic player and very high level. And there's lots of things that have been bothering her for all these years that she's just sort of ignored, right? So it's a matter of just then tweaking their body to their instrument within the requirements of their technique for that specific instrument. So that's one thing, and that's where my background in being a performer and working with all these different instrumentalists as I was a musician, I performed with every single instrument for the most part. So I have an idea. Do I play every instrument? No, but I have an idea of what the instrument needs are, and then you fit those needs to the actual individual person. So that is one of the big struggles is, these muscle tendon, these pain issues that come along with not being completely in alignment with their instrument. And a lot of times they don't realize that. I had the same thing. I had technique things that created tissue changes in my body. I didn't realize that I was doing that until obviously, my body raised its flag and said, "Uncle, I'm done." So that's what happens a lot of times with patients. Their body says, "Uncle, I'm done." I think one of the other struggles is this expectation that they're just going to have pain and that they need to play through the pain. And that's just part of being a musician. And it doesn't have to be that way. It definitely doesn't have to be that way. You shouldn't have to play with pain. But when providers tell you to rest and take time away from your instrument is one of the worst things that you can ever tell a musician. I believe personally that there's always a way to be at your instrument. Is it the way that you want to be and are used to being? No, not necessarily. But psychologically, there's a way for us to find a way for you to be at your instrument to some degree when you're dealing with an injury. You asked for 3, what is the other big struggle? I think one of the other big struggles is trying to figure out, again, what they can and can't do when they're dealing with an injury and where to go, what to do if you have an injury, who to see. Unfortunately, the healthcare world is challenging and they tend to dismiss a lot of things and they don't understand the needs and requirements of musicians. So I think that's one of the hard things. And that's one of the hard things that I had a hard time with when I was going through all my stuff. I went to people that specialized in working with musicians. I went into New York City and saw what were supposed to be some of the best providers. And I'm sure that they were good providers, but they didn't understand what it was like to be a musician. They weren't a musician. So they had no idea where I was at psychologically. They had no idea where, my fears were coming from. I couldn't play. Like they didn't take into any of that stuff into account. They never looked at me playing. They never looked at, my ergonomics, my technique, any of that stuff. So that's really, really an important thing that you really want to make sure happens. So I think that the fear and the anxiety of having an injury is a huge struggle too.
Yeah, so that's definitely a lot of insights, and then these struggles are definitely major just because of the current situation. Musicians have to practice more, and then whenever they're experiencing pain, they feel like they have to push through, even though most of the time they didn't really have to push through. There is a way, there is a solution to play the music instruments without any discomforts. There's a way to significantly improve that. And also another thing is that it's very hard to find somebody who knows the demands physically, mentally a musician needs and what they went through. So it's hard to provide very relevant or specific information to that. So these are definitely major struggles. So Heather, the next question is, at your practice and from your experiences, what are your solutions or what are the tips that you can give the musicians for them to start implementing right now from your perspective?
So there's so many. There's so many. I mean, we were just like scratching the surface with a lot of this too, because there's so much to talk about in musicians. And Andy, you know, because you're a musician, you play the piano, so you understand it. So when you're treating your musicians, you have a much better understanding of what they're dealing with as well. You know, so I think it's really an important thing. But I think that, you know, don't assume that you need to play through pain. And I think the other thing too is to try to understand where the pain is coming from. I'm a big believer in, you know, the whole mind, body, spirit connection. And, you know, for every thought and feeling that we have, there is a physiological response to that. So if we're having fear, if we're having anxiety, if we're having stress, all of that creates a physiological response in that and tends to increase our tension, our muscle tension, right? We then take that muscle tension and we can kind of be in a guarded position. And then we take that to our instrument. And then sometimes we can get into bad habits at our instrument because we've now taken this muscle tension and we've taken it to the instrument and we're stressed or whatever. And then we're playing with excessive force and excessive muscle tension and this kind of posturing. So I think it's one of my biggest tips is always to assess where you are at physically, mentally, emotionally. What are you feeling? What is your body trying to tell you? You know, our body is trying to tell us something when it's injured. So really kind of sink into that and figure out, what are you trying to tell me? Other than it hurt, like it's clearly saying I hurt, but the question is, why does it hurt? And you know, there's environmental reasons, there's physical reasons, there's emotional reasons typically that all kind of go into that. And then scan your body for tension. Are you using too much tension when you're sitting and playing? That's one of the big things. And just see, you know, are you hunkering down on your keys or on your strings and using more tension than you actually need? So, and with every tip, there's usually a little bit of a domino effect in terms of something else to look at. So there's kind of like a tier of things that kind of one plays into another, which plays into another, which plays into another. So that's one of the biggest things. My biggest tip is to make sure that your body is fit to your instrument. That is hands down the most important thing. And, you know, our music teachers teach us how to play from a technique standpoint that they know, right? And that works for them. And our music teachers aren't versed in anatomy, physiology, joint principles, kinesthesia, all these things. Like, I never do any of that. Why we don't take, as music majors, we don't take those classes. Why don't, you know, why would we be able to understand that? So our music teachers, you know, they don't know. Some of them, you know, try to do their best and pass on what they know and what they've learned. But, you know, we can't expect them to understand the body mechanics and really tweak and fit the instrument to a very specific body. So I think that's really when it comes into making sure you see a specialist that can help you with that. And that is the world of prevention right there. So if you're dealing with an injury, make sure that happens. If you're not dealing with an injury, still make sure that happens, because you can prevent things from happening later on down the line. Absolutely. So, and everybody's body is different. Your hand size is different from my hand size. Your neck length is different from my neck length. All of these things play into effect when you're actually sitting at your instrument. And no instrument is going to be perfect into somebody's body. The key is to avoid the icky deforming positions as much as possible, move in and out of them when you have to, and be as ergonomically correct at your instrument as you possibly can. So that's like prime number one. Number two is assessing, your tension and looking at, what your body is trying to tell you from that pain standpoint, and really just tuning in, kind of sinking in. Musicians are great at this. Musicians are, they're, part of what they do is all energy, playing, and it's emotional, and it's all this stuff that comes out. This is why we play, because it's a calling. So musicians are really good at kind of listening to their bodies and understanding kind of what's going on and what's telling. So when I do a lot of energy work with musicians, they really get it. They can really tune in, which is great. And then the other thing I think is, overall, make sure, for right now, especially with COVID, make sure that you are taking frequent breaks. Don't go to the practice room and play for 2 hours straight. I used to do that. I used to go to my practice room and practice for 2 hours straight. It's the worst thing ever for you physically and for you emotionally and mentally. Your break doesn't have to be long. I always tell my patients 30 to 40 minutes max. Take a break. It only has to be 2 minutes. Get up, get out of the deforming position that your instrument puts you in, because most instruments are forward. Most instruments are in, this kind of funky position. So you want to go to the opposite position. You want to do a couple, stretches. Get your blood flowing to all the muscles that have sort of been working really in finite detail, and then all the bigger muscles as well. Get a drink of water. Go down the hall. Take a walk for 2-3 minutes. Come back and then sit down. It doesn't have to be a long break. It can be super short. But it's enough to get you out of that position and that stagnant position that you've been in. So
I think these are really major tips. First thing, definitely, it's like, don't fit your body into the music instruments. It's like when we are doing everything else, for people working in the office, we're trying to have ergonomic office setup or have standing desks. Mm-hmm. And then for athletes, they are having very specific insoles or very specific shoe wears. And then for musicians, so do you have to fit into the music instruments? Then apparently not. But then, like you also said, a lot of the music instruments, they were built in order to create a better sound effect, not an ideal ergonomic setup. So sometimes it's inevitable we get that. But then, if you're not able to really have a better setup for your body, definitely make sure you take regular rest breaks. Even though they are very brief, they're gonna serve you for a much longer way, so you're not putting too much stress to your body. And definitely be mindful of how your body is responding. If they are giving you any warning signs, definitely pay attention to that and then start to seek for solutions. Be mindful of your own body, the mind-body connection, very important. And then also, driven by the healthcare system right now nowadays, a lot of the providers, they tend to only see your issue as an issue or just a problem of one body part. But then remember, we talk about a whole body, mind-body connection type of things. Like, your issue need to be addressed from a holistic standpoint. I know the providers are very hard to find to really take care of you that thoroughly, but then there are some of us out there that do that. You just need to find them. So I think, Heather, you definitely provided very good input with that. And then just want to have a very last question is, if anybody wants to find you, where are they able to find you in order to get more resources or get more tips from you?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook. So I have my business page, which is Healing Hands Therapy Center. And then if you want to find me on the web, it's healinghandstherapycenter.com. That's my URL. Facebook, I have a musicians group that's specific for musicians, and it's called The Masterful Musician. And then my personal page is Heather Wilkins Mongielnicki as well. I'm on Instagram, but I'm not very active on Instagram, so I'm trying to be better with that. But technology, it's like I feel like I'm scattered when I try to do too many platforms. So I'll be on Instagram more eventually, but right now mostly Facebook and then my website. So and I think it's important. I just want to add one more comment, and because you mentioned athletes, and there's always this analogy that musicians are like athletes, and a lot of people just sort of blow it off. But I think it's really important to understand that musicians, you are an athlete of a different sort. And when you look at all the professional athletes and all that they do to take care of their body so that they can do their job as a professional athlete, they have a whole team of people surrounding them, right? They have athletic trainers, they have physical therapists, they have massage therapists, they have coaches, they have all these different things that are around them all the time, that they have the support system. And they do very specific things to keep up their strength, keep up their flexibility, keep up their mind connection, that they do visualization techniques. They do all these different things. Musicians are the exact same. You're not going out and tackling people or grabbing a ball and stealing a ball and that kind of thing, doing that gross motor thing, but you are using your body in a very similar way, just in a more fine motor way, when you're playing for hours and hours and hours of a day. So it's super important to respect your body and take care of your body, just like athletes do. They take care of their bodies. They need to. Musicians need to take care of their bodies because this is what you're called to do. Most musicians, we're not doing it for the money, right? We're doing it because it's our love, it's our passion, right? So take care of your body so you can continue doing that love and that passion, that thing that fills you up and feels so aligned.
Definitely very good insight. So everyone, make sure if you guys want to have more insights or tips or connect to Heather, definitely connect with her through Facebook or join her Facebook group. She's been regularly releasing content and tips that are very beneficial for the musicians. So I really recommend you guys to join her community. You won't regret it. And Heather, really thank you for your time to hop on. This is a very great interview and a lot of insights you provided for us. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.